All you need to do is, unless you really don't want to, you just go to the school website and find the webcam of this class and you watch it. There, you got everything all caught up. Right there. Here, why don't you have a seat?
I know, I just wanted to see.
You can just have a seat. Okay. Something that I sent to all of you. Do you get my little remind messages?
Yeah.
Okay, if not, something needs to be fixed because I'm sending you these little remind messages, and if you're not getting them, there's a little breakdown in the system. So no problem. Nothing vital so far, but you need to come find me, especially during resource time, and sit down with your phone, and I will get you all caught up about little messages, because the last message I sent was basically informing you that this online assessment, this Kia assessment, it's still there, and you can take it all you want, and that's a good idea because that's the test. Not exactly that, but basically that, and you're getting the actual test, and if you're motivated to get good grading here, why not practice the exam itself, basically? And it will not negatively affect your grade at all. It's a formative assessment until later this week when it becomes a summative assessment. Carl.
I may have answered my username wrong and it won't let me do the pretest.
I can't help you.
Oh.
I warned you about if you can't remember your username or password for Kia.
No, I just typed it in too fast.
Okay,
No,
well, then type it in slower.
Okay.
You can do it infinite number of times. Right. Okay. If I can help you with that. If you ever forget your username or password, I can't help you. Just make a new one. It's not a big deal. It happens every once in a while. Okay. Any other questions before we rock? Let's rock. We are now looking at a slide which has to do with slavery, and you might be the type of student who's looking and you now have your notebook in your hand and you're going to write down some of these big thoughts. And that's fine if you do, but it's also fine if you don't. I don't really require you to write down stuff. If we're talking about ideas in here and we get a big idea, like for example, the name given to the journey from Africa to the Americas had a specific name. They called it something. Does anyone know? No. Yes. No, that's a boat. By the way, let's just pause for a second here. He took a shot and he was wrong. He took a shot and he was wrong. I said no to him and I said, no, you're wrong. That's a boat to him. But I appreciate that they took a shot. I really do. I encourage you. Have the courage to give it a shot. As long as you're being, genuine in your attempt to answer it. I mean, he sounded like he was trying to say the triangle trade, and that's not quite right. It's a good guess, really good guess, because it was part of something bigger. You don't need to explain. It was simply wrong. He explained the name of a boat. Again, that's a good guess. It's not right, but it's still a good guess. It was called the Middle Passage. The term given to the red lines is called the Middle Passage. Now, that's not anywhere up here. It's not up here. But so what? You're still responsible for it. You're still, now, if you need to write that down, then do so. Please do so. When the Europeans, mainly the Portuguese and the Spanish, were starting to explore, trying to get to Asia, would you mind taking a look at Mr. World Map in the back? Well, before we do that, let me just introduce you to certain parts of this room. That is Senior Corner. Senior Corner. That is Sep Corner, named after Sep Swanson, who graduated a couple years ago. And one day in class, he built a house over there out of cardboard. He brought in boxes and tape and made a house over there. And it really made an impact on me. This is Teacher Corner, for obvious reasons, and that is Escape Corner for obvious reasons. Okay, that is Map Wall. Okay. So let's look at Map Wall here. During the early period of exploration, what the Europeans were trying to do was get over here, because over here is where they had all sorts of good spices, salt, paprika, cinnamon, etc. And the Italians said, well, we'll go this way. We'll use the Silk Road. Well, when they did it that way, no one else was allowed to. I mean, they could attempt to, but the Italians would sort of control it like a monopoly. They'd say, this is our turf, get off our turf. What the Portuguese did then was they said, okay, fine, we'll go around Africa. And the fact that they did it that way meant that they would not allow anyone else to. This is our turf. Don't you touch that. Did you touch my lamp? And so the Spanish said, fine, we'll go this way. And what they thought was they'd be able to reach China going west. And I mean, eventually, that's exactly what happened with Magellan flying under. Magellan did this. Magellan made it all the way to about, he made it to about here, and then some Indians ate him, but his crew kept going all the way to Spain. Anyway, the Portuguese, I'll wait. Oh, you don't want to entertain us with your brilliant commentary anymore? Oh, great. Go ahead.
What?
Oh, you're done? Okay. When the Portuguese were going around Africa, they decided, hey, these dark-skinned people sure would make swell slaves. So you'll notice that the first thing they did was they treated Africa as this big thing that's in the way. In the way of what? Getting to India and China. And so phase number one of this little exploration is, gee, this big hunk of land is in my way. When the Spanish crossed and went this way and they ran into some islands, they thought, this chunk of land is in my way. And then phase two was, gee, what is this? Maybe we should check this out. So the Portuguese, they'd land and they'd kind of explore the coast. And then phase three was, let's conquer it. Phase one, this chunk of land is in my way. Phase two, what is this? Phase three, let's take it. So the Portuguese controlled the coast of Africa. And they took the dark-skinned people that were part of Africa and they packed them on boats like sardines. This journey to cross the Atlantic took several weeks, somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks, where you laid on your back on a several layered ship. You were allowed on deck once a day, and you were fed a meal once a day. And if half of you survived the journey, that was a good trip. Wow, only half died. Nice work, Bill. Hey, thanks, Ted. Yeah, half survived. Well, what about your boat? Only a fourth survived. Ooh, rough. Right? What an awful experience this must have been for the people that were on the boat. The conclusion, here's another term that, again, actually, I do think it's up here. It's right there. The conclusion that white-skinned people were superior to the darker-skinned people, which, of course, is alive and well today, didn't originate anytime recently. It's back here, 1500s. That conclusion is called ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism definition. It's the conclusion that my group is better than your group. Whether my group is my race or my nationality, I'm better than you. My group is better than your group. That's ethnocentrism. I got one more idea that's on this slide, and then we're going to advance. So slavery is an economic system. What does that mean? What's an economic system? We got one hand in the air.
Like capitalism.
Capitalism is another example. Do you know what capitalism is?
Capitalism is the idea of free market, where two people trade currency and they do it to benefit themselves.
Very good. That's an excellent definition of capitalism. So capitalism is basically, I have an idea for a good business, but so do you. I'm going to generate the necessary steps in order to promote that business. I make desks, right? I came up with the idea. I'm going to hire people. I'm going to find the raw materials necessary. It's my idea. I can pay you basically what I want. Now, what the government does do today is say, well, yeah, you can pay employees what you want, but you can't go below this. Right, minimum wage. That's the idea. So, but all businesses are privately owned, as opposed to other economic systems where businesses are owned by the government. Slavery is an economic system because what were those Africans being paid to work on the plantations? Well, we have to be careful now because you're thinking of payment as money. The argument from the owners of the slaves was, of course, we're paying them. Food, clothing, and shelter is what we're paying them. Later on in this class, when we get to the separation between North and South, that's the very argument that Southerners would make about slavery when the Northerners said slavery, it's awful. What the Southerners said was, well, wait a minute now, we're providing with food, clothing, and shelter. All you do is pay your workers a measly sum, and then with that little bit of money, they have to buy their own food, clothing, and shelter. Well, we skipped that part. We're just giving them what you're forcing them to buy when you're not even paying them enough. In fact, slavery's better. It's more humane. And other people are like, no, it isn't, because of whippings and stuff, right? That complicates the old equation of it, okay? So why was slavery seen as better? Because it provided food, clothing, and shelter. That's why. By whom? The owners, right? You think slaves were like, boy, are we lucky. We're owned. This is sweet. No, they didn't like that end of the deal. Questions? A couple more, and then we're going to shift gears. For whatever reason, and I actually do think I know the reason, I think a whole lot of you got this question wrong on the Kia because you couldn't figure out how to access the prompts. And it was mostly my fault. I forgot to make the prompts publicly available. So when you took the Kia and you were clicking on the prompt, it would give you a message like, sorry. And then you had to answer the question. Anyway, let's look at this map. This map represents the territory of North America owned by the British in red, the territory owned by the French in blue, and then the territory owned by the Spanish in that kind of greenish yellow. What I want you to do is look at this map and be able to tell me, not all at once, but be able to tell me if I randomly call on you, what is the advantage to one of those groups? It's either the British, the French, or the Spanish. Which group had the advantage, and what was that advantage? So 2 questions. I'll give you 10 seconds to think about it. If you even need that many. I'll get it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a ghost. You better. You just got
Okay, who would like to answer the first question? The first question is, which group had the advantage, British, French, or Spanish? Go ahead. British. Okay, how many of you would agree? All agree. What was the advantage? Go ahead.
More people.
More people. Very good. Each one of these represents a certain number of people. I mean, look at it. It's almost 40-1 over the Spanish, and it's 40-2. So the ratio, oh, math. If it's 40-2, what's the ratio? 20-1. Exactly. Okay. Now, could you look at this map and say, well, it shows that the British had better weapons?
Yeah,
Now, that might be true. Yes, that's right. They might have had more technology. But can you tell that from the map? No, you can't. You cannot tell that from the map. All you know is that the British had more stick little soldiers than the French or the Spanish. That's it. So let's note some things here. Again, you might be writing this down. You might not be. Whatever. I don't care. But do know that I can hold you accountable on a test, which is this week. I can hold you accountable to ask certain questions about this. Like, look at this. Look who owned more land. The French did. They owned way more land. But there was hardly anybody there. That's exactly what they did do. Okay? It's a difference here. What the French did was they sent a few people called voyageurs. Have any of you been to Boundary Waters Canoe Area? No. few of you. Okay.
I've been there when I was like,
The state of Minnesota has exactly one national park. It's called Voyageurs National Park. It's right by the Boundary Waters Canoe Area. It's beautiful, right? Wisconsin has 0 national parks. That doesn't mean anything bad. It doesn't mean Wisconsin's less or anything like that. It just, all national park means is that who pays for the running of it. A national park is paid for by the government in Washington, D.C. A state park is run by the state of Wisconsin. That's all that means, okay? The Voyageurs National Park is named after French fur trappers. So they'd make these enormous canoes. Any of you ever read the book, The Broken Blade, when you're in like 4th grade? Great book. Anyway, okay. They make these enormous canoes and hunt animals, skin them, and sell the skins in Europe. Okay? It's not groups of people settling in towns in the blue area. It's French hunters. That's it. What the British did was they made towns, cities. They made tobacco factories, farms. They need way more people, okay? That's why they had way more people. So the French, sparsely populated, what the French did was they interacted with the natives. They even married into the natives. The French saw the natives as partners. I don't know about equal, but more equal than the British did. Okay, very good. This should say intermarriage with the E. I don't know why I did that. This is intermarriage. The French married right in with the natives. The French became part of the Indian group. Not, hey, you're in French area now, native. We're in your territory. Much more respectful than the British. Okay? The British area was densely populated. Cities, towns. Did they trade with the natives? They did. But it was not seen as equal like the French. This was much more of a, we're looking down upon you sort of thing. Much more an example of ethnocentrism, which is, again, a term that justified the European enslaving of Africans. It's because I think I'm better than you. Same thing going on here. The British thought they were better than the natives. So we're not going to intermarry with them. We're going to move in. You're going to move out. That's the British. Now think about that. I can now test you. I could ask you a question like this. Which European group actually intermarried with the natives versus which group pushed out the natives? The French intermarried. The British pushed out. Okay. There was no interaction. A couple other things to note here. What the British did when they moved in was clear the area. They cut down the trees. They need room to make their cities and towns. Okay. Why don't you sit in the desk? That's nice. Stay. So they're pushing the Indians west. By the way, this is a pattern. You will see this throughout this class, that as the white people move in, they push the natives away. And what they do is they say, look, just move across that river. We'll never bother you again. And then more white people move in, so they expand. They fight a battle. The Indians win a battle. The whites win the war. They say, look, just move a little bit further west. We'll never bother you again. And it continues throughout American history.
Not to bother you again, sorry.
A couple other things here that are true. The red area here represents the 13 colonies, the original 13 colonies. The British had an economic system that is on your Kia. It's called mercantilism. So here's where England is as far as this map is concerned. What the English did was they said, all right, we're going to grow crops over there. But we own it. We own those plantations where the crops are being grown. We're the entrepreneurs. We're the owners. Now we need labor. We need someone to work on those plantations. That's where we'll bring the slaves in. And we need land. That's where the land is. The owners lived in Europe. The slaves were brought from Africa, and they grew it in the 13 colonies. That's the original version of globalization. Globalization is when an American car company actually makes their stuff in another country, but they call it a Ford. Right? It's very common. It's very likely that the car you own, if you think it's an American company, American-made car, but it isn't. Like, for example, I'll give you another example. Toyota. Toyota is generally seen, anyone know, is what country is the home country of Toyota? Go ahead. Japan. Do you know where Toyota's largest car plant is? Tennessee. It's not a Japanese company. It's an international company. All right, last slide here, and then we're shifting gears, I promise. What you have here are 4 things that existed. These are 4 actual things that existed. The Virginia House of Burgesses, the Mayflower Compact, the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, and the Pennsylvania Frame of Government. All 4 of these are examples of colonial governments that existed. The colony called Virginia governed themselves. The colony called Connecticut governed itself. And what they wrote was their own constitution. They didn't call it a constitution. They called it the Virginia House of Burgesses. They called it the Mayflower Compact. They called it the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. In parentheses, if you're writing this down, label these as constitutions. That's what they are. What is a constitution? It's directions for how to run a government. The U.S. Constitution is simply an instruction manual for how you run the U.S. government. That's all it is. Where'd they get those ideas? The people who wrote the U.S. Constitution got their ideas from other constitutions, like these 4. So what I'm going to do is simply show you what exists today thanks to what existed back then. For example, it is the Virginia House of Burgesses that had something called a bicameral legislature. Now, before I tell you what it is, does anyone know what it is? What's bicameral mean? Go ahead.
Senate, House.
Very good. They had a Senate and a House of Representatives. 2, bi, meaning 2. Bicameral legislature. In the U.S. Constitution today, anything that the Senate passes, the House also has to pass. Anything that the House passes, the Senate also has to pass. Decreasing the likelihood that they'll pass anything. If they wanted lots of bills to be passed, they just have made one, but they didn't, because they didn't trust government. The Mayflower Compact had 2 major ideas. One was the idea of equality. All the men on the boat were equal. You notice what I just said there?
Yeah.
All the men on the boat were equal. You women were second-class citizens. Till 1920, sisters unite, alone. It also had the idea of self-government or consent of the governed. It means the same thing. Self-government and consent of the governed mean the same thing. Consent of the governed means this. Do I have your consent to take this pencil and throw it?
No.
What does consent mean?
Yeah.
What?
Permission.
Permission. Consent of the governed. Permission of the governed. Let me ask this question and I think you'll understand. Why is Donald Trump our president? Because we chose him. We gave him our consent. We choose you, you lead us. That's the deal. That is called consent of the governed. And some people in America, about half, are perfectly happy with that, and the other half can't believe it. Well, welcome to democracy. It's messy. Okay. The third Fundamental Orders of Connecticut has 2 basic ideas. One is, again, consent of the governed, and the second one is limited government. Limited government. So let me explain what limited government is supposed to mean. Can a police officer come into this room right now and grab you by the eyelids and peel them back so that they go over your head?
Yes.
You show me where it says that a cop can't do that.
They can.
Okay. Limited government means this, that our government can only do what the Constitution says it can do. Otherwise, it can't. It can only do these things. That's it. Limited government. That's not true in other countries where they have monarchs. In countries with like Kim Jong-un, North Korea. He can do whatever he wants. Nobody can say, wait a minute, hey, Kim, hold on a second. You can't wear that shirt. Where does it say you can wear that shirt? Kill him, would probably be Kim's response, okay? Our government is a limited government. It's limited. Finally, the last one that we will write down and then we will shift gears here is this. The Pennsylvania frame of government, which had this idea of religious freedom. No need to raise your hand here, but let's just think about this. How many of you in here are, again, you don't have to raise your hand. How many of you are Catholic? How many of you are Lutheran? How many of you are Protestant? How many of you are Anglican? Do we have any Jewish people in here? Do we have people who are agnostic? Agnostic means you really have no idea, right? How many of you actually say there is no God? Which is atheist, right? All of you are allowed into this room, no matter what your religious beliefs, because the U.S. government says, not that they don't care, of course they care, but we don't care. Start your own religion. Almighty Silo, thank you for giving us life, and start your own religion. Meet there every Tuesday at 10. Go ahead. It's a little weird, but go ahead. You happen to live, by the way, in a country that is the incubator of more religions than any other country. More religions are started here. Now, some of them go off the deep end and go into a little thing called Cultville. Those usually end badly. But also there are others that remain very small, and it's usually, the members are usually my dad and my uncle and my other uncle and my aunt. And, it's like family sort of thing. But that is perfectly allowed. It's allowed. Why did they allow that? Because when the people who wrote the Constitution looked around, they looked at what Pennsylvania did and they thought, good idea, let's do that. Let's do that. Any questions? I will give you a 2-minute break here. You need to stand, stretch, go get a quick drink of water. Class starts in 2 minutes. Okay? So please stand up, get the bugs out, loosen up, and then we will attack a couple documents. Okay.
I've got 2 years now.
I was talking about that.
Yes or no? I get a third one if you want. You want 3 people to interview? They're engineers all over the place. And even good friends of mine. But yeah, you guys can find one.
Well, maybe.
Yeah, engineers after you.
What do I have after this? What do I have after this? False. Are you tired?
Oh, baby, I'm so tired.
Mr. Potter.
Yep.
For sociology, did you figure out if we're going to be doing the presentations?
I think we're just gonna do it. Otherwise, let's do it. Okay, let's start. The people that are not quite here, Tough luck. We are looking at these documents again. If you need a new copy or you never got this, don't worry, it's just fine. Just please let me know right now. I will give you a copy right now. Who needs a new copy of the documents? I'd be happy to give them to you. I have them right here. Anyone? You all have these? You do. Okay. Anyone else need one? Anyone else need a copy? Anyone else need a copy? It's no problem. No judgment here. Okay. What this class is going to be doing in your English class is writing a paper answering this question: were the colonists justified when they declared independence? You remember? I think it was you. No, maybe it wasn't you. All right, let's try this little exercise again. I am going to cuff him in the back of the head. And the reason I'm going to cuff him in the back of the head is because the Vikings are simply a superior team, sorry, to the Packers. Okay, now, I'm not actually going to cuff you in the back of the head, but let's act it out. Ready? Super slow-mo. When I was your age, there was a cartoon called Mighty Mouse. And Mighty Mouse had an ally, kind of like Robin. And his name was Super Slow-Mo.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Super Slow-Mo's superpower was that he was the slowest being in the universe. And you might be thinking, that's a superpower? Yes, because when they would fight villains, Mighty Mouse would just be going back and forth and kicking everybody's butt. And Super Slow-Mo, who was a cow, would go and always strike the villain at the end because Mighty Mouse would throw him into his hoof. And Super Slow-Mo would be the hero. All right, here we go. Ready? Remember why I'm doing this. I'll pretend this really is quite a blow, right? Smash nose against it. All right, thank you. Now, I go back to the original argument. This is important. How many of you were sort of amused at that silly little incident? You found it kind of entertaining?
That was really funny.
Some of you raised your hands. My next question is the important one. Was the logic I used good logic?
No.
So you're glad it happened, but my reasoning was iffy. We're all glad that the colonists declared independence. We're glad we're an independent nation. But were the reasons they came up with good ones? You out there just were happy that I cuffed him in the head, but you thought, the reasoning. Because the Americans made two claims about why they felt justified. One, they said taxes weren't fair. Now that document we already went over in class. How many of you remember going over document 2? How many of you are sitting there like, I don't remember this at all?
Oh, it's right there.
Is there anyone out there who wants me to spend 1 minute and go over document 2 again? I'd be happy to. Okay, look at document 2. Okay, document 2 has a pieces of information, and I'm going to fly through these. Document 2 is the part that's in the square. And it's some guy named James Otis. James Otis was a lawyer. He lived in Massachusetts, and he argued that the British taxes weren't fair. And because the taxes weren't fair, the Americans had the right to declare independence. What made the taxes unfair is that there were no Americans in Parliament. Parliament is Britain's government. And the British Parliament passed all these taxes. Well, they passed taxes for people that lived in England, but England had people in Parliament. And they passed taxes for people who lived in Scotland, but people in Scotland were in Parliament. And they had people in Wales in Parliament, but there were no Americans in Parliament. How can you imagine this? What if Russia passed a law that every American needs to wear red on every Tuesday? Yes. would we be subject to that law?
No.
No, it's like, but you're Russia. We don't answer to your laws. That's what James Otis was saying. You are making laws for us. We're not represented at all. So we don't have to pay them. So the argument being made in document 2 was that the taxes weren't fair. Okay? That's the argument being made in document 2. Okay? Now allow me to retort. Allow me to answer that argument with document 1. So on this spreadsheet that I informed many of you to make, if you're looking at this like, I don't know what this is just a spreadsheet, and you can make it if you want or not, doesn't matter. But just understand all the pieces. So I'm gonna just go across here, and as I'm going across, what you should be doing if you have this, like I can see he's got it, right? What you should be doing is filling it as we're going, okay? Like for example, I'm now looking at document 1. Which document is document 1? 1. Put a 1 there. Put a 1 right here. 1. It's document 1. This one. That one. And relax if you have not made this. It's just fine. Right? I see that he's now making it, but let me just ask you this question as you're making it. Which document is document 1? Did you need this to make that, to answer that question? Okay. So you want to make it, fine. If you don't want to make it, that's fine too. Just be able to tell me the answers. I'm going to pick on you again. Who's the author of document 1? Who said it? As he's looking it up, everyone else, what if you're the one answering the question? Who said document 1? Who said it?
We did.
I'll wait. Very good. Thomas Whately is his name. Thomas Whately. It's right there. Write his name down. Thomas Whately. Or just mark it right on this piece of paper. It's fine. I'm fine with that, totally. My third question. This is for anyone who wants to answer it. Who is Thomas Whately? Who is Thomas Whately? Be able to answer it. It's great that some of you are raising your hands, but what if I call on you? Could you answer this question? Who is Thomas Whately? Go ahead.
He was the advisor to the chancellor.
He was an advisor. He was a British advisor. He worked for the British government. He's an advisor to something called the British Chancellor of the Exchequer. That's a fancy way of saying this is the guy in charge of taxes. So all these taxes that the British imposed were imposed by the British Chancellor of the Exchequer. Thomas Whately was the advisor to that dude. This guy worked for the British government regarding taxes. What do you think his point of view is going to be about the fairness of these taxes?
Totally fine.
Probably going to be totally fine. Let's see if you're right. I will, using my most annoying British accent possible, read this document. See if you can figure out what I'm saying. We are not yet recovered from a war undertaken solely for the Americans' protection. A war undertaken for their defense only. They should contribute to the preservation of the advantages they have received. Pish posh, pish posh. And okay. What? What?
We fought a war for them, so they have to.
Yes, there it is. In this class, now don't write anything down yet. Let's just figure this out. In this class, we will learn soon about this thing called the French and Indian War, which when I was your age, I thought was a war between the French and the Indians. And it wasn't. It was a war between Britain and France. But some Indians helped the French and some Indians helped the British. Okay, so it was a war between India and France. And it was fought in North America. So the British and the French fought a war in North America against each other. And the British won. Would someone who just listened to me just now answer this question? Who benefited from the British winning that war? Go ahead.
Us, the Americans.
Yes, the colonists. We just beat the French to protect you, not somebody living in Britain, not someone living in Wales. You. We just protected you. I got it. I'll do it. Yeah, you got it. Okay. So if I just fought a war and thousands of my people just died for your benefit, do you think you could help pay for it? That's what the British did. They said, you know what? We just fought and died for you. Should you help pay for it? And the way we're going to have you pay for it is through a tax called the Sugar Act. You'll buy some sugar and then you'll pay a little tax. Any of you buy these things called clothes? You buy these things called clothes? Hey, every time you buy a piece of clothing, except in Minnesota, which has no tax on clothing. When you buy a shirt in the state of Wisconsin, you are not only buying the shirt, but you're paying the state of Wisconsin so that they can have roads. And the argument goes like this. How'd you get to the store? A road. Well, where does the road come from? Who pays for it? You do! Could you help pay for the road that got you to the store? Thanks! That's what the British did. They said, hey, Americans, we just fought a war for your benefit. Could you help pay for it? Thanks. So take this it's not fair argument, shove it. Because the taxes were fair. Okay, so let's fill this in. The document is document 1. The speaker is Thomas Whately. He's the advisor to the British Exchequer. Should the Americans break away? No. The quote's the whole thing. So if I were you, I'd just write we ... received. We ... received. Or if you're just marking it on this piece of paper, which is totally fine, sort of whole thing. Why aren't the Americans justified? Because the taxes were fair. They're saying the taxes aren't fair so we can break away. But they were. They were too fair. And under key number 1, will you just write down war debt? And then we'll hold off on that, war debts. Okay? And we'll hold off on the rest until. So this is what I'm going to do now. I am going to assign this half of the room. You have document 4. What I want you to do is be able to answer these questions for document 4. I'll give you 2 minutes. This half of the room, you have document 5. Same thing. Could you answer these questions for document 5? I'll give you 2 minutes. Don't be afraid to be wrong. So much.
Wait, let me get my thingy.
We gotta figure out who it is and work together. On document 4. Yep. Author Nicholas Cresswell.
You spilled the blood of your brave soldiers for us?
Oh,
We shouldn't bear that.
Were the colonists in that war because of the British started the war with them, or was the colonists? Was the war started by the British?
That's a good question. Of course, the French claimed that some British colonists crossed over into the French area of land, so they started it. And the British claimed, well, no, we were close, but we never crossed the line, and then you attacked us, so you started. Credibility. Why should we listen to this person?
So basically, like the colonists are just like a little brother.
Where are you going with that?
That's right. I think that's right. I think what we'll do is we'll have you. We're gonna have you show me. Only have you. Next time you're in here, we'll put you back here. See how it goes. Give you another chance. Oh.
Excuse me, sir.
You know, I've got that paper towel. Okay. May have had enough time, maybe not, no big deal. So let's look at document FAR. If you had document FAR, I'm talking to you over here, right? Which document is document FAR?
This one.
Far. Okay. Far. Who's our speaker?
Nicholas Cresswell.
Nicholas Cresswell. That's his name. So you could either be writing it down on your spreadsheet or just highlight it right on this piece of paper. It's just fine. Okay, thank you for participating. Let's have someone else. Who is Nicholas Cresswell? Yeah, go ahead.
The journalist.
Very good. He's a journalist. He's a writer. He's a writer. And what Nicholas Cresswell did was he traveled through the colonies and he wrote about his journey. Okay. He's a British person, though, visiting the colonies. Guess what his point of view is going to be? He's from Britain. All right. Now let's see if you're right. So let's skip down to the very last sentence. This is the key sentence. Here goes. He says, the New Englanders, New England is the part of northeastern counties. It's basically Boston. The New Englanders, by their canting, whining, insinuating tricks, have persuaded the rest of the colonies that the government is going to make absolute slaves of them. So let's think about this. What we have before this little document was a bunch of people from New England saying, the British sure are mean. Man, are they mean. I mean, that's what document 5 is, right? You get the document you guys read, if you read it, it's basically saying the British sure are mean. And then this guy's saying, they're lying. They're lying. They're exaggerating what the British soldiers have done. The New Englanders, by their canting, whining, insinuating tricks. Hey, colonists, these people from Boston are lying to you about British abusive actions. The colonists are exaggerating British abuses. Okay. Now I'm going to give you an example. Will you all please look at document number 3? This is fantastic. Okay, it's one of my favorite things ever. Have any of you ever seen this before? You know what's going on here? What are we looking at? The Boston Massacre. And here's what happened. This is a version of the Boston Massacre made by an American. Now let's look at this. Really look at it. According to the person who made this engraving, were the British firing randomly?
No.
Nope. It was an organized attack. How do we know that?
Because they're all standing in a line.
They're standing in line. Very good. Look at the amount of smoke, which indicates that they fired at the same time. How do we know that it was an organized order and not just soldiers acting on their own? Very good. The commanding officer standing behind them, sword raised, mouth open slightly as if to say, fire. Look at the colonists to your left. Did they deserve to get shot? No, they're Christmas shopping. And most important of all, right in the front middle, what about the puppy?
Oh, not
No.
There's a puppy. And if this were what happened at the Boston Massacre, I would agree that the British were meanies. My goodness, they shot unarmed Americans, mind you, in the back, and the puppy. And my friends, we know that this is not what happened. This is a lie. And we know that because these soldiers were arrested. They were arrested right after this, and they were put on trial in Boston. And a jury of people from Boston found them not guilty. Americans found them not guilty. But the guy who made this engraving, his name was Paul Revere. He wanted you to think this is what happened, but it didn't. This is not what happened. And so your example for this, for document 4 is document 3. It's a lie. This isn't what happened. the colonists exaggerated British abuses. Here's your example. This is not what happened. That's enough for today. You have to hang here for about 2 minutes, so just hang.
Wait, weren't they like throwing rocks up the British?
Yeah. Yes, the Americans were aggressively attacking the British with rocks and snowballs and chants. So we know that this is not what happened.
I didn't understand physics. That's not physics. I didn't understand physics.
Skylar, America, yeah.
You can be like,
It was
yeah,
not
yeah,
Well, you're supposed to sign up for a project. So we did. It's like on the first day of school.
I don't think we did. I don't think all of it.
We'll get you.
It's
Yeah, so like super blast all the time. Where is it?